Magandang hapon po. Annyeonghaseyo. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you may be. So, welcome to today's public lecture organized by the UP Career Research Center. I am Jasmine Rombawa from the Department of Communication of the School of Social Sciences of the Ateneo de Manila University, and I will be your moderator for today's event. We are delighted to welcome our participants joining us in the safety of their homes or wherever they are right now. So, through this whole forum lecture will be aired or is being aired in live streaming through Facebook and YouTube. So we wish to greet every one of you and hope that all of you will have a fruitful learning experience this afternoon. So before we begin our program, we would like to remind our viewers of some house rules. You may send your questions and comments to our panelists or to our lecturer throughout the event in the Facebook or YouTube live chat box. Kindly introduce yourself with your affiliation when raising your questions. And these questions will be collected and chosen to be answered during the open forum. You are also reminded that the whole forum is a safe space for everyone, and it will not tolerate any form of bullying and trolling, academic or otherwise. So the organizer reserves the right to remove those who will create any disruption in any part of the program. We would like to also inform you that this event is being recorded. Today's lecture is organized in celebration of the 73 years of the diplomatic relations between the Philippines and Korea in 2022. Just a few weeks ago, on March 3, was the exact official day when the diplomatic ties were established between the two countries. So today's lecture is very timely. So now, let me introduce our guest speaker. Our speaker for this afternoon finishes BA Linguistics degree at the UP Department of Linguistics and is currently an instructor of Korean as a foreign language at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. His research interests include Korean language, language education, and sociolinguistics. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. James Dominic R. Manrique. James, the spotlight is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. 네, 안녕하세요, 여러분. Yes, Miss Pam, can you please broadcast my PowerPoint? 네, hello. I hope everything's going well with everyone, and I'm sorry if there's going to be a technical difficulty in a few minutes because actually there's an unannounced power interruption right now in our locale. So before we start our lecture, since we're going to talk about advertisements today, let's of course start with the TV ad. Oops.
Kung magpadala ka ng pira sa imuhang special someone, diri na sa Palawan Express pira padala. Barato,
mura,
paspas,
mabilis,
walay hasol,
walang kuskus malungos.
Palawan Express pera padala. Labs na nationwide.
Mura, mabilis, walang kuskus malungos.
tiyak na darating sa Palawan Express.
Ang reyna ng universe.
Dito na tayo.
So yes, this isn't Korean, but we don't have a problem with this TV commercial, right? The Philippines being a multilingual country, multilingual advertising is not new to us. If we see the national TV, when we saw this actually on national TV in 2014, we paid no mind. But this, who among the viewers can tell me or tell us what these words mean? 네? 네, 맞아요. 안녕하세요, 여러분. Hello, everyone. James Manrique here. And today, we will be talking about multilingualism in advertising, specifically the Korean language and its presence in Philippine advertisements. We are going to look at these. 네? Philippine brands have started to use Korean language in their advertisements. Today, we will answer the question, how and why is the Korean language used in Philippine advertisements? Ne? So guided with that, let's look at the backdrop of this phenomena. Let's first paint a picture of the Korean wave. Of course, the motivation of all of this is Hallyu, or Korean wave, the craze for all things Korean. The term Hallyu was coined when the K-drama What is Love All About, or 사랑이 뭐길래, was aired by Chinese state-controlled broadcaster China Central Television, or CCTV, in 1997, and became the second all-time most popular among the imported broadcast content. Since then, Korean cultural products have been gaining popularity and recognition globally. In 2000, the drama Winter Sonata, or Kyoryonka, became a hit in Japan and made Nami Island in Chuncheon, where the drama was filmed, a must-visit destination for Japanese tourists. In 2008, girl group Wonder Girls naman became the first Korean act to appear in the United States record chart Billboard Hot 100 with their English version of the single Nobody. Next, singer Psy's single Gangnam Style is the next one to do so in 2012, surpassing 2 billion YouTube views in 2014. Aminin natin, lahat tayo nakasayaw na nitong Nobody and Gangnam Style sa mga Christmas party natin, right? Ne? And lastly, the 2019 film Parasite, Kiseng Chung, by director Bong Joon-ho, became the first non-English language film to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Ne? Sa Philippines naman, eto, magkakaalaman tayo ng edad dito, no? The Korean wave made a debut through the airing of the Korean novella Successful Story of a Bright Girl in Philippine television in 2003. But it was not until the next drama, Autumn in My Heart, so naalala pa ba natin to? Gaul Donghwa, when Korean novellas gained wide public attention in the country. On the other hand, Sandara Park, a member of former K-pop group 21, first found her success in the Philippines when she finished second place in the talent search program Star Circle Quest in 2004. As Filipinos watched Sandara's career with great interest, 21's debut in 2009 with Fire paved the way for the rest of the successful K-pop acts in the Philippines. So kung tandaan nyo pa yung mix, right? Aabangan talaga natin yung daily top 10 na yan. Tapos bibili pa tayo ng songbook para lang aralin your lyrics. So that's the impact of the Korean wave in the Philippines. And as we've seen with the global success of Hallyu, it's not difficult to think that the Korean cultural industry is very, very lucrative. Ne? According to a report released by the Korean Foundation for International Cultural Exchange, Hallyu-related exports came to around 12.3 billion US dollars in 2019, up 22.4% compared to 2018 figures. On the other hand, the increase in consumer good and tourism exports attributable to Hallyu is pegged at 26.1%. So ganyan kalaki yung contribution ng Korean wave sa Korean economy. And notwithstanding, we came to know South Korea as an industrial good exporter, diba? We know South Korea with their motor vehicles and electronics. Recently, however, other consumer goods like cosmetics, fashion, and food products have been exported to the Philippines. This popularity is evident in the brightly lit outlets and boutiques of Korean skincare brands in major shopping malls. So meron tayong Nature Republic, Innisfree, Etude House, Misha, and so on and so forth. We also have the dedicated aisles in supermarkets and convenience stores containing Korean and other Asian food products and condiments. I'm sure most of us have tried and subsequently regretted doing the Samyang challenge, right? And in the rise of the samgyeopsal restaurants throughout the country, diba, kahit Ako personally, I live in a rural area. Kahit sa tabi namin merong samgyeopsal restaurant. It's so bizarre. And sana po may kain tayong lahat. Kasi nakakagutom talaga yung topic natin today. Ayun. So, given the success of both Korean cultural products and consumer goods in the country, Philippine companies have started to ride the Korean wave in their advertising campaigns. Let's look at the Philippine retail brand Bench. They have been featuring Korean idols and actors as their endorsers in 2012. We have Super Junior members Donghae and Siwon, actor Lee Bin Ho, 2PM member Nick Kun, actress Park Shin-hye, actor Park Seo-joon, K-pop group Twice, and actor Hyunbin, to name a few. Their rival brand, Pen Shop, has likewise signed Korean endorsers such as Sandara Park, actor Nam Joo-hyuk, Blackpink member Lisa, actor Jisoo, and Astro member Chalnu. Recently, however, even non-fashion brands have been endorsed by Korean celebrities. Girl group Blackpink became endorsers for Globe in 2020. Actor Lee Min-ho became the regional brand ambassador of Lazada in 2020 as well. And Smart released a campaign in 2021 featuring actors Hyunbin and Son Ye-jin, as well as the boy group BTS. So celebrity endorsement is a common practice in advertising, as it has been proven effective in increasing advertising effectiveness, brand recognition, purchase intentions, and purchase behavior. Moreover, celebrity endorsement can directly translate into sales in idol cultures like Hallyu, where fans may voluntarily engage in promotional activities and purchase idol-endorsed products, some even en masse. Syempre, one, you want that item as a collectible and as a symbolism that you are a true fan. Ne? Two, you want to prove that your idols are indeed popular, na bumenta, nag-sold out yung ini-endorse nilang product, right? And three, you want to make sure that your idols get more endorsements in the future because, of course, they sell. But as more and more brands are contracting Korean endorsers and the field is becoming more saturated, kumbaga, companies needed to employ a different advertising strategy. In 2017, Wendy's Philippines launched a Korean cuisine-inspired product line featuring kimchi-flavored burgers and French fries. In 2020, Shakey's Philippines had endorser Luis Manzano in an outfit that resembles a Korean People's Army uniform as a reference to then-famous Korean drama Crash Landing on You, advertising the brand's Korean barbecue pizza. And publisher Adarna House launched the imprint A-Pop Books in 2020, and they focused on translating Korean bestsellers such as Kim Soo-hyun's I Decided to Live As Me, 나는 나로 살기로 했다, into English. But not only that, another approach brands have taken advantage of is using the Korean language in their advertisements and products. Aside from appending K, as in K-pop, K-drama, so meron tayo ditong K-beauty, K-binge, to mean Korean as an adjective, so Korean beauty, Korean binge. Some brands have started to incorporate Hangul, the writing system of the Korean language, or Romanized Korean words in their copies. So meron tayong mga Hangul here, meron din tayong Hangul here. Okay? So why is that? Okay? As seen in the title of this lecture, that's what we're going to look at today. How and why the Korean language is used in advertisements in the Philippines. This is a very peculiar phenomenon. It is a very remarkable choice for advertisers to do so, as the population of Korean speakers in the Philippines is mostly comprised of Korean expatriates and Filipinos of Korean ancestry. As of 2017, there are around only 93,000 Korean migrants residing in the Philippines. In addition, Korean language education is relatively new in the country and is only available in select high schools and universities as of last year. So to answer our question for today. We're going to look at social media posts and online advertisements on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube of some Philippine brands that featured the Korean language. So what brands are we going to look at? So we have McDonald's Philippines, the Philippine franchise of the multinational quick service restaurant chain McDonald's. Bonchon Chicken. Bonchon Chicken Philippines is the country's franchise of the South Korea-based fried chicken restaurant Bonchon Chicken, currently managed under Scotland Food Group Corp. We also have Lucky Me. It's an instant noodle brand managed by Mondenisin Corporation. So Nice, a Philippine spirit brand launched by Emperador Distillers Incorporated in 2020. We also have BLK Cosmetics. It's a beauty and personal care brand co-owned by actress Ann Curtis, and Avon Cosmetics, a personal care and retailing franchise of the multinational direct sales company Avon in the Philippines. As we've seen kanina, we also have Bench, an apparel brand based in the Philippines owned by Suyan Corp. And lastly, Pen Shop, its rival brand, the Philippine apparel brand naman under Golden ABC Incorporated. 네, 자 이제 광고를 같이 봅시다. So let's dive in and look at their advertisements. Okay, so there's 5 noticeable themes which emerge from the linguistic analysis of the Philippine advertisements featuring Korean language. The first one is complementary and mutual translations. Looking at this logo type by BLK Cosmetics when they launched, looking at this logo type by BLK Cosmetics when they launched their K-Beauty collection in 2018, meron tayong nakalagay dito na Hanjongpan limited edition above the word K-Beauty. This is a case of complementary translation where 2 or more languages convey different kinds of content. Here, the English text K-Beauty says one thing, of course K-Beauty, but Hanjongpan says another, limited edition. Doing this can pose a problem given the small number of Filipinos who can speak Korean. But what if hindi nila maintindihan? However, limited edition, the word limited edition in English was often mentioned in their post captions and in news advertorials of BLK Cosmetics. So the audience is not missing out on important information such as it being a limited edition product. In 2019, they released new products under the same collection, and the new logo type, this one, featured the same K-Beauty in Roman, but now with K-Beauty, the transliteration of K-Beauty, the word K-Beauty in Korean. This is considered a full mutual translation, as the Korean text presents no additional content and the audience who cannot speak Korean nor read Hangul will not miss any information. Similar strategy is done by So Nice, where the labels of their variants are mutually translated. So if you look at the label of the bottles, may nakalagay dyan na Chongpodo, green grape. So meron tayong English translation as well. And for grapefruit, we have Chabong. So mutually translated, meron tayong Hangul, meron tayong Korean word written in Hangul, and meron tayong English translation. For Lucky Me naman, in this advertisement of Lucky Me, they published in July 2020 this video advertisement featuring their new product, Hot Cheese Ramyeon, together with the already existing jampong under the umbrella of Korean flavors. In the video title, right, the Korean annyeong is used instead of of English hello. This is a case of code switching naman. So what is code switching? Code switching is what we do when we speak Taglish. Diba? We switch out words or phrases of one language, tapos papalitan natin siya ng another, just like what I did with that sentence. So here, by virtue of using a greeting, diba? Annyeong is a greeting, hello. nare-reinforce yung Koreanness of the products that the brand is introducing. So parang here, the hot cheese ramyeon and jampong, they're telling you na, hello, annyeong, you like Korean food? Try our product. This is Korean food too. Di ba? Merong congeniality na na-establish through using a specifically Korean greeting instead of an English one. Same thing happens here with the McDonald's ad for Taste of Korea campaign. The Korean word selka is an abbreviation of the Konglish self-camera, and has the exact same meaning as the English selfie. So why use selka instead of selfie? Bakit nilagay nila dito sa hashtag selka? The hashtag Taste of Korea Selka Day. The important part there is in Selka Day. They're making a reference to the K-pop fandom culture na Selka Day. So what's a Selka Day? It's where fans post on social media selfies of themselves, often in a photo set together with photos of their idols on a specified day every month. So merong ganong culture yung mga K-pop fans, and given that these posts by McDo aim to generate engagement through photography, diba? Show off your photo with the new McDo K-Chicken Burger. Ganyan. We can say that the ad or this post is evoking the specifically Korean photo-taking culture and aesthetic that is associated with the word selka. Even though selfie and selka in its essence, just taking a photo of yourself, iba yung concept of selka kasi it's what you do with your picture after taking it. Of course, you have to post it on social media. How you present that on social media, specifically, you're invoking selka day, diba? So parang you're calling on to that habit by K-pop fans that they like to post pictures, and you're using that to generate engagement with your product as well. Now, let's take a look at bonchon naman. Bonchon does a similar thing. First, this one. There is no reason for bonchon chicken to not use rice bowls. Instead, they already did that before. They called their product rice bowls, but now they're calling it pop bowls. As both Philippines and Korea eat rice as a staple food naman. More curious is this substitution of chicken in classic fried chicken. Bakit chicken? The native Korean word for chicken is takkoki or tak. While this chicken here is a Konglish word typically only used in chicken dishes of Western origin. The copies of both advertisements then make it clear that these products are Korean style, K-style, and made the Korean way. This substitution is deliberate in that by naming these dishes in Korean, their Korean-related qualities are emphasized. Quick note, bap here is mutually translated. So meron kang romanization bap, your Hangul pap, and your English translation rice. But here, chicken, wala, yan lang siya, chicken in romanization. So why is that? If you don't know Korean and there's no English translation, you wouldn't know what pap means. You wouldn't know that it means rice, but it is easy to recognize that, chicken is probably chicken since magkatunog naman yung dalawang words na yon. So that's one thing that you have to remember as well when deciding whether to do complementary or mutual translations. The Korean language has not been used in advertisements, not only in writing, but also in speech. Bonchon Chicken has released many video advertisements. If you check their YouTube, ang dami doon, where their actors perform entire dialogues spoken in Korean. And so does Lucky Me.
맛있다. 한국말하네? 너도? 얼굴도 빨개졌어. 완전 한국 스타일이야.
So if we look at the content of that dialogue in Korean, it does not contain any substantial information about the product, 'Di ba? Instead, it fulfills an affective function. Sabi nga dun sa dulo, 완전 한국 스타일이야. Korean ang dating. Para bang it suggests na by eating their product, by eating their Korean style cup noodles, it's as good as you being a Korean in Korea eating authentic Korean noodles. Diba? So that's what we have for translations and code switching. Next, we see the Korean language used in emotives and colloquialisms, where they are generally decorative and do not carry essential information relative to the entire advertisement. So if we remove those texts, if we delete those Korean parts, the advertisement will continue to serve its purpose. Bench ran a series of advertisements featuring shirts modeled by Hyunbin and the Korean greeting "안녕하세요," together with the English translation "hello," very small lang dun sa baba, and that can be seen in the posters. We have to note though that these shirts, there are 4, I think, sa post series na yon, they're not part of any Korean collection by Bench. They're just, Bench shirts. So why the need to use "안녕하세요"? Ne? Ano lang, design lang ba siya or what? What the Korean emotives like these and colloquialisms do in ads is that they provide affect. So they invoke emotions, feelings, or sensations. So here, the feeling that we might get when we look at the ad is that Hyunbin wearing that shirt, diba, is the friendly next door oppa who greets you "안녕하세요" every day, and that creates an attachment between us and the ad, and by extension, the product. Here naman, we have Bonchon chicken. "안녕하세요," "안녕하세요," is also used in the background of Bonchon chicken social media posts where they are promoting their online ordering service. While it can be argued that the text welcomes, diba? "안녕하세요," diba? Greetings. So, wina-welcome tayo nitong "안녕하세요" to the online store. It is not compelling enough as it only appears in Hangul tapos medyo transparent pa. Like background lang talaga siya. Walang English or Tagalog translation even, nor romanization. Thus, we can say that this use of Korean in this instance is tokenistic in that it only serves to be a sign of Koreanness in the poster, even para lang merong laman, merong element dun sa side na yon ng PubMat. No? So, very design focused and not content. Same thing here. So what is saranghaeyo doing here beside classic fried chicken? This is saranghaeyo, I love you, without translations nor romanizations. Like it's a standalone. Anong sense niya dyan? You can argue, yes, merong saranghe dito sa baba. Tapos meron ding English text maliit na maliit, I love you. But that's really far away. Magkalayo silang dalawa eh. So it's difficult for audiences to make that relationship na, okay, this text here means saranghe. The audience might not be able to make that connection. So here, tokenistic din yung paggamit ng Korean language. But here with Makto, they use the same sarangheyo. But we can argue that this serves a specific purpose. Even though there's no English translation provided, the romanization sarangheyo is enough for fans of K-pop and K-drama to recognize na, di ba, naririnig natin yun sa mga K-drama or sa lyrics, alam natin na it means I love you. So, ko to, with love in the iconic tagline, "Love ko to." Di ba yun yung tagline ng McDo? "Love ko to." They replaced love there with the entire expression, sarangheyo. Sarangheyo ko to. Ne? Other Korean words have been commonly used in advertisements are colloquialisms popular among Korean speakers and Hallyu fans. So, daebak, an expression of amazement and enthusiasm. appears as the name of Pen Shop's collection aimed towards K-pop and K-drama fans. McDo also used Daebak and Mashiso in their series of selfie photos, featuring products from their Taste of Korea line. These words written in Hangul appear decoratively. So they appear as Hangul only without romanization. Tapos kasama niya English translation. BLK Cosmetics also has the same thing. In one of the shots showing a close-up of Ann Curtis and the product, the word Yepuda appears with no accompanying romanization nor English translation. So why do all of these? For those audiences that one can read the word either in Hangul or in romanization, and two that knows the meaning and cultural associations related to that word, these words serve as a cue for the expected emotional response. So when you see Debak or Machiso or Yepuda, you are expected to be amazed with the Korean-inspired shirt line, or you are expected to think that the Korean-inspired food is delicious, and you are expected to deem pretty the Korean-inspired color cosmetic products. Let's focus on this ad by McDo. I find this one here is Omo in the caption in one of their posts interesting. Omo is an interjection often used by Korean women to express surprise or amazement. So when we code switch with interjections or expressions, this emblematic tag switching often serves as a marker of ethnic identity. So it's ethnic identity, but we know neither the brand nor the target audience are part or are of Korean ethnicity. So ano yung na-achieve natin by saying Omo, so pretty? This can be thought of as the brand saying, hey, fellow Korean culture enthusiasts, I also know Korean culture. I can use these expressions correctly. And so na-reinforce yung supposed Korean identity of McDo or of the Taste of Korea line that is being advertised. Ne? Just like the emotives and colloquialisms, using address terms, kinship terms, in advertisements also assumes that both the brand and its target audience have a common and accurate understanding of Korean cultural elements. In this post by Bench, Zui was referred to as Mangne, as she is the bunso of girl group Twice. Notice that there's no English translation, so diretso lang, happy birthday to Twice the Grams Mangne. Right? Of course, if you are someone who celebrates the birthday of Zui, it is reasonable for Bench to expect that you, as their audience, are familiar with terms like mangne that is commonly used in K-pop culture. So there's no need to translate that for you. Here naman, Park Seo-joon is referred to as oppa. This oppa is truly the definition of lit or fire. Literally, oppa means kuya of a woman. So if you're a man, you call your kuya hyung. If you're a woman, you call them oppa. So obviously, if you take this post in context, that this translation does not apply. This is where the prerequisite cultural knowledge comes in. Here, the word oppa has a nuance of sexual interest and flirtation in the context of romantic relationships. So likewise, Hallyu fans also use oppa as a term of endearment for physically attractive K-pop stars, which is supported by the use of the fire emojis here in the caption. I would even go out on a limb and say that a majority of the casual Korean content consumers mas familiar sila sa colloquial or figurative use of oppa, like may guwapo, oppa na yan, di ba? Mas familiar sila dun sa meaning na yon than its literal or conventional meaning. We can also see that a bit more clearly here in this shirt designed by Pen Shop in their Debak collection, You Only Love Oppa. So it's a wordplay on YOLO, You Only Love Oppa. Other examples of Korean address terms used in advertisements are as follows. So when actor Lee Min-ho became their brand endorser, Bench launched a promotional event entitled Be My Yobo, where fans received entry passes for a fan meet with certain purchases. So Yobo is a term of endearment between couples. And in this one naman by So Nice, in this product brief, the brand calls their audience 친구, friend. So in both cases here, even if the English or Filipino terms were used, so it's nice to meet you, friend, or it's so nice to meet you, kaibigan, ganyan. It is not that detrimental to the core message of the advertisement. However, by choosing to use the Korean counterpart deliberately by using yobo or 친구, the brands call upon the Korean identity of the entity being referred to. So by saying be my yobo, parang kunyari nasa K-drama ka tapos ikaw yung leading lady, yung leading man mo si Lee Min-ho, or kung Chingu, it's so nice to meet you, Chingu. Kunyari nakikipag-inuman ka ng authentic Korean soju with your friends, ano bang typical K-drama inuman? It's like sa labas ng 7-Eleven or whatever convenience store, yung mga ganyang Korean imagery related to those words, na-invoke yan just by using these words in their copies. Ne? Another common theme is wordplay. Of course, humor and advertising, they go hand in hand. And wordplay not only attracts attention, but also serves as a riddle which provides the audience an intellectual satisfaction when solved. However, multilingual wordplay relies on the linguistic knowledge of the audience. So a prominent feature in McDonald's Tastes of Korea campaign is its use of annyeong, not to mean hello, but as a substitute of the Filipino word anong, from ano or what. So, anyong bago sa McDo, meaning niya what's new in McDo. Anong bago sa McDo.
안녕 from McDo 안녕 sarap ang hanap mo 안녕 taste of Korea 안녕 gusto 안녕 mang craving love McDo 사랑해 ako to taste of Korea.
Gusto ko lang mandamay ng pagka-LSS. So this bilingual wordplay is possible due to the fairly minimal phonic distance between the original word anong and foreign word anyong. So in other words, magkatunog talaga sila anyong and anong, kaya madaling gawin to. No? So here, yun nga, sinasabi natin na what's new in McDo, we are using a Korean word to approximate a Tagalog word. So, di ba, anyong, Korean yung ginagamit natin instead of a Tagalog. Lucky Me did the opposite. Ang ginawa niya, it used Tagalog words to approximate Korean words naman. So, let's watch this video.
Lucky Me Jampong has a new look. Enjoy the same spicy kick of Korean flavor. Mmm! Korean seafood sarap.
So the expression "annyeonghaseyo" or hello is encoded behind Tagalog "anghang saya", anghang saya, and dun sa video naman kanina anghang sarap. So like before, it works kasi magkatunog yung anghang saya, anghang sarap, and annyeonghaseyo somehow. But again, what we're doing is you're using Tagalog words instead of Korean words. Oops. Okay. After that video ad in 2020, Lucky Me changed their hashtag to Sarang Anghang. Sarang Anghang when their hot cheese ramyeon was released. So unlike Anghang Sarap and Anghang Saya, na they are composed of two Tagalog words, Sarang Anghang is composed of two words still, of course, but one from each language. So we have the Korean word sarang, love, and Tagalog anghang, spicy. And they are related by virtue of rhyme, diba? Sarang, anghang. And we saw that wordplay is facilitated by one, sound similarity, anyong and anong, and rhyme, sarang, anghang. Moreover, the Korean words that we saw are sarang, love, and annyeonghaseyo or annyeong, hello. By using the basal aspect of the languages, yung mga pinaka-basic like phonology and greetings, basic words, a higher language proficiency requirement na kailangan for the audience to decode that multilingual wordplay is avoided. In doing so, na-increase yung recall ng audience through wordplay and the introduction of another element in the advertisement through multilingualism are realized without alienating the portion of their audiences who do not speak the language. Lastly, advertisements typically undergo proofreading to ensure that no regulation regarding advertisements are violated and no errors are committed. However, errors may be left uncorrected in cases where, the proofreaders of multilingual advertisements are not proficient in the languages used. Bonchon chicken. Bonchon chicken featured here, ito yung text. Janggan ma늘. Janggan ma늘. In an advertisement of their partnership with Food Panda. The intended meaning is soy garlic. Kasi soy chicken, right? However, it's misspelled. It's misspelled. The correct spelling is actually ganjang manil. So what they did, napagpalit nila yung first two syllables. Dapat ganjang manil siya. Bonchon chicken here committed a spelling error. So they misspelled. I don't know paano nakalusot yan, but it did. In another ad by, Bonchon chicken, the Korean words bingle, and mugum can be seen. However, there's two problems in the poster. First, the Korean words bingle and mugum, nakabaliktad siya. They're typeset upside down. Why? I don't know. Is this a design choice? And even if it is, why would you put words in an upside down manner, right? And second, most importantly, mugum, this word here, mugum, means bundle or bunch, which you might think makes sense kasi it's a 2+1 bundle, right? But mugum is literally bungkos, yung tinatali na bungkos na nakatali. So, if you want to translate bundle in this context, diba hindi naman nakatali ito mga food na to, the Korean word that you would want to use is the Konglish term setu. So set. The other word naman, bingle, it means round and round or spinning, ganyan. That word does not fit in the context of this poster, of this advertisement at all. And the only one explanation that I can think of is that the copywriter, the one who did the copy of this advertisement, misspelled binge, this word binge here, as bingle, B-I-N-G-L-E, maybe confusing it with the word bundle, siguro nagmamadali or whatever, while searching for its Korean equivalent in an English-Korean dictionary. And the rest is history. Bingle mugum. I don't know. This is a lexical error where the wrong words are used in the text. And perhaps my personal favorite from this set is this one from Avon. In a promotional video by Avon, the logo type of their K-Beauty collection is shown briefly. So we have K-Beauty collection in English. It's a taas nun, merong seemingly random Hangul letters, jamo. Compare that with the logo type that we saw earlier from BLK Cosmetics, K-Beauty, and then we have K-Beauty. So this random sequence can actually be replicated by inputting the QWERTY keystroke for the word K-Beauty in the double-click layout, the most common Korean keyboard layout. So in Korean, despite having individual letters for each sound, the letters are grouped into syllable blocks following some rules. So siguro the copywriter was not aware of that syllabic formation of Hangul, in addition to assuming that the double-click layout functions similarly to the Japanese Romaji input method. So if you know Japanese, you know that each kana is typed by entering its romanization following the QWERTY layout, the English QWERTY layout rather. Ne? So this one naman, it's a typographical error. Ne? And before wrapping up, some few minor observations lang din for So Nice, or this banner photo from So Nice. The Korean language can be incorporated in the brand name itself. So the complete brand name of So Nice is So Nice Hengbokhan. So Nice Hengbokhan. If you look it up in their Facebook page, yan yung lalabas. The Korean word Hengbokhan is the adnominal form of the adjective Hengbokhada, or to be happy. To be happy. So one would normally expect that a noun would come after that adnominal, yet there is not present in the brand name nor in any advertising material related to the brand. Moreover, the choice of Hengbokada is not expected, as the brand slogan "So nice to meet you" generally translates to "만나서 반갑습니다" in Korean. The word Hengbokada is 99% not used in these contexts. Okay, so that's interesting why they do that. Another one, Hangul can also be used in set design. Set design. So in one of Lucky Me's video advertisements for jampong, signs containing the word panme and 24시간 용업 can be seen at the backdrop. So you have 24시간 용업, panme, 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 panme. Ne? The use of the latter is appropriate. It's correct. Wala tayong problema dyan. But the former, medyo iffy tayo. Bakit? Usually, the word panme specifies or signifies that the product is being sold at a store. So, for example, meron kang signboard sa labas ng tindahan na jampong panme. Ibig sabihin, nagbebenta yung tindahan na yun ng jampong. And as I've mentioned, nasa labas typically yung mga sign na ganon. A panme sign is often located outside the store to call attention that the product is being sold. So here, bakit siya nasa loob? It's facing inwards, right? In this instance, Hangul is used to attach a Korean identity not through the product or the person endorsing it, but the set location itself. A convenience store's interior would not differ significantly universally naman, save for the products being sold. So as such, the advertisement incorporated Korean products and as a background, and specifically the signs written in Korean to suggest that the scene is shot specifically in a Korean convenience store. Now, so in this case, mas nakikita natin how the language is being used decoratively. After all of that scrutiny and observation, what can we get out of this? With the global expansion of Korean Wave's reach, brands have been trying to capitalize on its popularity by incorporating Korean-related elements in their product lines and advertisement campaigns. While the usual strategies include signing a Korean celebrity to endorse their products and creating a Korean-style product, instead, the Korean language is starting to be used in advertising as well. As a multilingual country with most citizens being at least bilingual, the Philippines is no stranger to multilingual advertising. However, the population of Korean speakers in the Philippines is not at all significant. Given this, it may be considered peculiar to incorporate the Korean language in advertisements geared towards Filipino audiences. How, then, is the Korean language used in advertisements? When used in an advertisement, Korean words typically exist together with its English or Filipino counterpart in a mutual translation. And its romanization, if written in Hangul, if it substitutes an English or Filipino word through code switching, it is often a word expected to be known by a Hallyu fan, if not a typical Filipino. So examples include greetings like "안녕하세요" or common expressions in Korean content like "사랑해요." Surprisingly, some cultural elements and Korean colloquialisms are also called upon. Selka instead of selfie, 대박 instead of awesome, omo instead of oh my god, and the like. This, together with the use of Korean address and kinship terms like oppa, mangne, 친구, suggests that the expectation from Filipinos to be familiar with the aspects of Korean and social and cultural life is adequately met. The Korean language also plays a part in humor advertising through wordplay, albeit using only the basal elements of Korean in order to not alienate audiences who do not speak the language. Naturally, linguistic errors also appeared in the data, ranging from typographical up to lexical errors. With a general description of how Korean language manifests in Philippine ads, a preliminary interpretation of why it is manifested can be made. First, important information about the product, such as product name and other specifications, are still written in English or Filipino. If parts of it are written in Korean, a translation is provided. This is an acknowledgement of the fact that only a marginal part of the Filipino population speaks Korean. Second, the Korean language can be used to evoke Korean cultural practices or associations. So by calling rice pop, it becomes a Korean style rice. By saying selka instead of selfie, one calls upon the selka culture found in Korea and Greater East Asia. By calling someone oppa, one does not only accommodate the Korean identity of the person that we are calling, but also consciously or unconsciously evokes the Korean connotations associated with that term of endearment. This also gives us a hint on what images of South Korea these companies are trying to associate themselves with. So, for example, that Korean color cosmetics are 예쁘다 or pretty, Korean fashion is 대박 or awesome, and Korean food is 맛있어 or delicious. Third, by incorporating the Korean language and Filipino wordplay, a brand can convey its message alluding to the Korea-related elements or supposed Korean identity of the brand, the product, or both. Fourth, the Korean language, especially Hangul, may also be used decoratively. In cases where the Korean text does not convey crucial information about the product, they instead exist to reinforce the Koreanness of it. As such, they are prone to error or at least be infelicitous, as they are thought to be marginally important. Advertisers do not seem to put much value on the language, as evident in the lack of research that they do. They think that having these errors are immaterial, since only a small percentage of Filipinos know Korean anyway. As long as there's a language component in their ad, advertisers mistakenly believe that the campaign will do well. It is undeniable that riding the Korean wave to boost sales is a worthwhile strategy. However, with the growing interest of Filipino fans in learning the Korean language, brands must start thinking about how they are using Korean in their advertisements. They ought to exercise caution, especially with those words carrying cultural associations or nuanced meanings. Moreover, it should be noted that Korean immigrants and expatriates in the Philippines also see these advertisements. A brand sends a negative message to native speakers should their mother tongue be used incorrectly. We might also be able to say that the Korean language is currently fetishized in advertising. While Hangul and Korean language is indeed part of the Korean identity and can be used to associate the brand and its product with Korea, it can be detrimental to the brand if used inappropriately. So please, if there's any advertiser watching this lecture, please hire your Korean language and culture experts. Ne? And as most research on multilingual advertising, especially in the Philippines, focus on English, it is hoped that this research can provide a starting point for the description of linguistic landscapes in the country with respect to foreign languages and the identification of manifestations of Korean global influence in the Philippines. Another possible direction for future research is the analysis of the Philippine audience's reception to multilingual advertisements, such as those mentioned in this study. So that's it with multilingualism in advertising, the Korean language and its presence in Philippine advertisements. 여러분 들어주셔서 감사드립니다. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, and thank you very much, James. Now, I learned a lot from your lecture. And really, there are a lot of ads that are in Korean, and yeah, you're right. They have to be really culturally, um, appropriate as well when they come up with these advertisements, and make sure that these samples of the language are accurate. I saw you pointed out those wrong like words, di ba? Yung baliktad yung spelling and all. Anyway, yes, we see there are a lot of your students who are in this lecture, James. Magandang hapon daw and annyeonghaseyo, 선생님. And okay, so this session is now open for questions and comments from you guys who are in Facebook Live or YouTube Live. So we'd like to remind you that if you have questions, you may chat or like put it on the chat box of your Facebook or YouTube Live. And if possible, please introduce yourself with your affiliation as you raise your questions. So I will be reading them, and I will be asking them to James later on. So we have our first question coming from Eric. No, Eric is asked. Eric Paulo 22. So Eric Paulo 22 is asking, in your observations of these ads and your knowledge of their intended target audiences and target markets, are these ads effective? And effective in the sense that they raise awareness and ultimately do what ads are supposed to do, which is both short-term sales. What do you think?
So for effectively, okay, so I appreciate that you clarified effective, because if we're gonna talk about numbers, we don't have access to the effectiveness of those campaigns. But for awareness, for ultimately do what ads are supposed to do, which is boost short-term sales, awareness of the brand. I think it's still more effective. The mas effective pa rin yung paggamit ng Korean celebrities as endorsers. Yun talaga yung mas nakikita natin na nagta-translate to sales, yung campaign, as yun yung pinakita ko kanina example of the Pepsi Cola can with the pictures of Blackpink members, right? Yes. Ang dami talagang bumibili noon. Like if you look at social media, ang daming pictures noon. But for example, in the case of McDo Taste of Korea line, I think the main driving force of the sales or success of that campaign is not the use of Korean language in their advertisement. I think it's because the concept is novel. Nabago na kasi before Japanese style food lang yung meron sa McDo, but now they're introducing this Korean style food. So it's bago, people would want to try that. So mahirap alisin yung factor na yon, and I'm more compelled to say that that's the factor that gives that boosted the sales of McDo for Taste of Korea. For other products naman, for example, color cosmetics like in Avon and BLK, still it's on the imagery of putting K before beauty. But just by saying K beauty, I think that's K-beauty, yun talaga yung driving force of the sales, kasi we have this image na if it's a Korean makeup, Korean skincare product, maganda, high quality, effective, you'll get that glossy skin look, ganyan. But not necessarily putting Hanjongpan or K-beauty or Yepuda in their copies. So it's still more of a decorative or more of a visual effect, and hindi pa doon nagbe-base, hindi pa doon naka-angkla yung sales noong mga products that use these advertisements, I feel like.
Yeah, you so to clarify, you feel like it's not really the copy that's boosting the sales, but really the imagery, no?
Mhm.
Yeah, great. Let's have another. There's another question by Kyungmin Bae. Dr. Bae asked, aside from the local ads incorporating the Korean script or phrases, are there also frequent ads that feature other Asian, Chinese, Japanese in particular, regardless of your skills in other language? Would you share any insights of how these K-inspired ads are distinctive from other Asian languages incorporated ones? So parang looking into these in another Asian language. Yeah.
Mhm. So I feel like Korean is the way Korean language is used in this advertisements is not that much distinct with Chinese and Japanese. Nakikita din natin dito yung, I don't want to say the term, but pagiging basta-basta ng paggamit ng language na parang, yun nga, as I've mentioned kanina, as long as merong Hanzi, kanji, or hangul in their posters, okay na, Asian na siya. But I guess since dahil mas bago sa atin yung Korean influence compared to Chinese and Japanese, together with the use of Korean language, mas strong din yung paggamit ng other visual elements, other Korean visual elements in their advertisements, like dressing up like a Korean person or a Korean idol, or actually just using a Korean idol as an endorser, or yung nakita natin with Lucky Me using a Korean backdrop, or nakita natin with Bonchon and Lucky Me na actually speaking in Korean, eating
Yes.
Korean food, mga ganun. So I think that's the thing that sets or advertisements with Korean language. That's what sets apart that with Chinese and
Chinese and
Japanese in
Japanese.
particular.
Yeah. Okay, so we have another question coming from our YouTube live audience. Has Saint Kizia, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Has Saint Kizia Mina would like to ask, would these advertisements, especially those with errors, be considered as cultural appropriation or maybe misappropriation?
I feel like this is casting value judgment on the advertisers, but I'm more inclined to say that this is just a product of misinformation. Like they just don't know better. Parang siguro they're restricted then with their budget that they can consult with Korean language or culture experts. So it's not much. It's not yet cultural misappropriation, but more of misinformation lang talaga. But moving forward, now that we are aware that these things are happening, we might want to consider, correcting that para hindi na siya mag-end up into being outright cultural misappropriation.
Okay. So actually, I also have a question while I was listening to your lecture. So buti na lang ko no moderator. So I have a chance to ask my question. So there you are a Korean language instructor no for foreign language. So has the presence of these advertisements affected your students' understanding of the language, or have they seen like these nuances being like irritating or whatever opinions that they have? Naka-experience ka na ba ng gano'n? When you're
So
teaching?
So personally, the yung medyo negative affect that we can associate with these advertisements, medyo wala pa. Personally, I teach kasi beginner level
Mm.
Korean. So for me, I can use these ads to teach the like vocabulary or even the writing system. Yan pa lang yung usage that I can get out of these advertisements. But when I talk to advanced learners like my peers, my co-teachers, ganyan, sometimes they point that out to me and sabay-sabay kaming nagki-cringe. kaya din namin nung sinusulat ko rin tong research na to, sa kanila ko din nakuha yung karamihan ng content na, "Hey James, don't you think this is so cringe?" Parang ganun. So ayan, meron talagang required na deep cultural understanding and linguistic understanding of Korean for you to be able to see the nuances behind these na parang behind you have this facade na okay, my Korean language element, but beyond that there's nothing, and you have to have that knowledge to see through that.
Okay. And then I have another question. Interested talaga ako sa topic mo. Anyway, since there are a lot of Filipinos who are also learning Korean language, not only formally but informally, no? How do you think these presence of these texts and advertisements would actually aid or maybe hinder or their learning of Korean language and culture? Parang
Okay,
would
so
it
from a
affect?
Korean
Yeah.
From a Korean language education perspective, these texts, these contents, we can use this as an educational material since
Mm.
they contain the Korean language, and mas malapit siya sa mga Filipino learners natin since they are made in a Filipino context. But if if these materials are laden with these errors, parang hindi naman yata tama to use those. Although siguro, okay, maybe we can use those as vocabulary, yun nga, vocabulary. Like, merong word na mashiso. Okay, merong English translation na delicious. So, magre-register na sa utak ng student. Okay, that's delicious, mashiso. Yapuda, pretty. But if you go beyond that and see yung dubbing or yung mga parang advertisement spoken in entirely Korean, medyo shaky. Kasi
Mhm.
one, I haven't talked to the producer, so I don't know if they're authentic or made by or dubbed by native speakers, but it doesn't feel like it.
Oh.
Yun. So medyo hindi tayo sure doon sa aspect na yun.
Yeah. So for those who are learning Korean, no, don't use it like informally on your own. Don't use those as
Be
examples.
careful.
Be careful. Be wary of your cherry pick. Okay. Next question coming from our Facebook page. We have Gerald Bristow. Why do you think company don't consider cultural appropriation and language use in their advertisements, and how would these errors in language use in advertisement affect Filipino consumers? Okay.
It's a nice question. Let me address the second question first. How would these errors affect Filipino consumers? Not much. Yun nga, sabi natin kanina, like majority, very many Filipinos do not speak Korean. So for them, these errors, hindi nila alam na errors yan. They don't care. So okay lang. And that's what allows advertisers to get away with it. Na parang, it's not that, ano ba, how do we phrase this? They are just riding the Korean wave na parang,
Mm.
okay, Hallyu yung uso, K-pop, K-drama. Let's use that as our peg. Let's use that as our pivoting point in our campaigns. But since it's the Korean influence in the country, it's still in its beginning. Kailan lang ba talaga nauso yung K-drama sa Pilipinas? Right? Kailan lang ba talaga yung mga dating haters ng K-pop dyan, kailan lang ba sila naging K-pop fans, di ba? So, very bago. So, in that regard, meron pa tayong growing pains na hindi pa natin nako-consider yung effect of our use of their culture, use of their language, cultural elements, how we use those, and how that affects one, Korean language learners in the Philippines, two, Koreans in the Philippines, and three, Koreans in South Korea that might be able to see what we do here in the Philippines.
Okay. So, all right. So we have a very nice discussion right now, and for those people who would still like to ask questions, still feel free to ask them. Our Facebook chat box is there. Our YouTube chat box is still open for some other questions that you would like to ask our speaker, James. No, so I think no advertising here in the Philippines, like using as you said, no, the Korean culture in advertisements is like riding in the popularity of K-pop and K-drama, and it doesn't actually. Am I putting it right? It's not actually getting in like really more consumers or more purchase intention from consumers or those who are viewing it. So, do you think it's still possible? Like it is still practical to do so, or it is really much better to really get, you know, celebrities to endorse their like Korean celebrities to endorse their products if it's riding the Korean wave?
So yes, talagang hindi maalis sa Korean or riding the Korean wave yung paggamit ng endorsers. Yun yung pinakamalaking hatak ng idol culture eh. Na once hinawakan, once ginamit ni idol yung isang product, bebenta yan, whether it's directly or indirectly promoted. No,
Mm.
but for Korean language, it's not that it's not effective, but more of it's just lumped together with other Korean visual elements like wearing hanbok or or putting a Korean signboard behind you. But nasa backdrop lang siya eh. Hindi siya kasing effective unlike using Korean endorsers. So maybe moving forward, it is hope that the Korean language will perform a more meaningful function than being used decoratively. But again, we are targeting Filipino audiences who has no reason, well, no big reason to learn the language. So somehow, somewhere in the future, we will be able to find that sweet spot na one, we are giving enough attention to the language use na we are not um we are not offending people, we are not um using it as parang a tokenistic something lang sa ating advertisement. But on another, hindi tayo nagbibigay ng so much attention na hindi siya financially practical for advertisers to use the Korean language in their advertisements.
Okay. Oh, we have a last question from Eric Paulo 22 of YouTube. This is actually Dr. Capistrano. It's a follow-up on the last question. Is it because of Filipinos in general also having a very introductory, rudimentary appreciation of foreign culture? This is a follow-up from your response to Gerald Bristo's question.
Mm. So nakakatakot pag si Dr. Capistrano yung tatanong kasi baluarte niya to eh. Pero that's a good question po kasi that's a yes for me. The extent of Filipinos na interested in Korean culture, the extent that they're familiar with the culture is through the consumption of Korean dramas. Yan yung for mga tita natin, mga mom natin na kinikilig-kilig sa mga romance K-dramas, and for the young people naman, most often yung mga idol culture content like K-pop or Korean variety shows. So entertainment media talaga yung nakukunan nila ng cultural information, and not much on the traditional immersion of books, going to museums, or even immersing yourself in the country. Not much on that. And in one of the lectures from Dr. Frank Encinas, nakuha ko yung concept na Filipinos daw have when they think of a Korean, they have two distinct concepts. So one, the idols or the Korean actors, actresses, and another one, kapag nakita sila ng mga tourists dito sa Philippines, Korean tourists dito sa Philippines, that's another concept na hindi nila ina-associate or hindi na-associate with that idealized idol persona like a singer, actor, or an actress. So that's an interesting concept as well that we have to take into consideration when we're making these types of Korean content in this country.
Yeah, I think you're right, no? And also may pahabol si Dr. Capistrano. Hindi mo siya tanong, it's just a comment, no? That he actually has a proposal to write a marketing case on the use of Korean wave content on PH ads, awaiting for approval. Baka naman gusto niyo mag-collaborate, no? So,
Looking
okay.
forward to that po.
Diba? Yeah, we would like to read that, Dr. Capistrano, later on pag na-approve na siya. So, any last words, James, before we move on to our reactor?
So for me, this is a very interesting one kasi being early 2010s, 'di ba? Korean culture is very unheard of. It's very niche. If you like Korean culture, medyo you're looked down upon, you're bullied. But now we're here in that part of our we're at that time na liking Korean culture is widely accepted, so much so that we are incorporating Korean cultural elements in our daily life. No, so some people might even say na parang they're iffy with the extent na nakikita nila yung Korean culture all around us, na parang it's cultural imperialism almost. And so that and with that we have to think na how do we tread that line na we are welcoming and even using someone else's culture to in our country to talk to our own countrymen. But is it going to go the road of cultural misappropriation, or is it going to be just part of globalization of Korean wave? So that's a very interesting concept that we might want to look into moving forward.
Yeah, and for further research, no, that maybe I would read about later on, written by Sir Manrique, di ba? There. Okay, so let's now move on to the reactor to give her reaction to James' lecture. I'd like to call Professor Farah Cunanan, an assistant professor of the UP Department of Linguistics. Ma'am Farah, the spotlight is yours.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon. First of all, James, congratulations on your presentation, and I'm happy that you're able to present this in public, even if it's just a preliminary. It's a preliminary research, and thank you to UPKRC for giving James this opportunity. So what we can see, as James has mentioned, that advertisers and companies acknowledge that language is a powerful tool to catch the target consumer's attention. It evokes a sense of authenticity. The, the, the use of Korean characters and Korean words and expressions evokes a sense of authenticity, especially for those who don't know the Korean language or culture, or to those who usually conflate Korean, Japanese, and Chinese as one in East Asia. And we can see this with the use of chicken or pop bowls, because I think Korean products have to Korean products, yeah, or Korean related products have to distinguish themselves first from Japanese or Chinese cuisine in this case, because it's just recent. It's just recently that we have the popularity of Korean food. For the beginning Korean language learner, uh, the use of Korean language in these ads serves as a introduction, or it gives them a way to practice reading or using Korean in a local setting. But for the advanced Korean language learner, it can also be an opportunity to flex what they know and point out errors, just like what James and his peers do. And also mentioned by James earlier is that there is a lack of effort, a seemingly lack of effort to double check the grammaticality and use of language. We also see that there's this common misconception that translation is just a matter of looking something up in the dictionary or using Google Translate. But it is important that we check the grammaticality, the context of the use, and also the naturalness of the language in use. This multilingualism in ads show us also the contact among cultures. What we see thus far from the presentation is localization of foreign ideas, but there are also some maybe internationalization of local products. Lucky Me has SB19 as endorsements, where Filipinos portray themselves as Korean like. And maybe later we will see a good blend of multiple cultures in these ads. So why is it important to look at these ads from a critical lens? Studies of ads over the past decades show us how ads have formed or reinforced certain stereotypes. So ads have been defining what beauty is for us. It's having fair, unblemished skin, having straight, sleek, long hair, or tall and slender body. Um, Ads has also shown us the image of a perfect family. You have a good-looking and hardworking dad. You have a pretty, caring, domestic mom, and at least two children: an energetic boy and an adorable girl. But these images do not represent our reality. They do not represent the reality for most of us, for many of us. And so we tend to project our ideal selves online or in public. And studies have shown that teens have low self-esteem. And also online, we contribute to body shaming, othering, name calling, and so on. And while we advocate for inclusivity, social justice, sensitivity to various cultures and backgrounds, especially in this globalized world, what we see thus far from these ads is a limited representation of the other culture or of various culture. Much like how others associate Filipinos with domestic work or nurses. And what this means in the context of James' presentation is that Korea is not just K-pop, it's not just K-drama, it's not just K-beauty, but these ads show us that Korea is just these. No? Recently, I saw this logistics, I think it's a logistics company ad, poking fun at our call center agents, that they don't really listen to our complaints, but when the customer is an oppa, he gets full attention from the service, from the call center agent. Some of my suggestions, if James wants to pursue this paper, to develop this paper further, and also an invitation to the audience to work on similar studies. You can analyze the language according to medium. So billboards, online ads, online still ads, blurbs, online blurbs, and commercials. Each of these has its own distinct feature and view. So if you have a billboard, you will not see much text. For online ads, for online still ads, you need to attract people. You need to get the people's attention, because we are faced with so many information. With blurbs and commercials, you can get more instances of code switching or code mixing, and you see the interaction among the different languages. It will be interesting to see also if there will be any changes in the use of Korean words. James mentioned earlier that oppa in the context of the Philippines is the romantic, takes on the romantic meaning and loses the family term meaning. You can also look at where code switching happens or where code mixing happens. Are Korean words used like Filipino words? That is, do Korean words get conjugated like Filipino words, like how we use English words in our everyday interaction? Videos would also be interesting, because we hear the characters speaking Korean or those Korean Filipino English words. So you can also inspect if the pronunciation is assimilated into the local language, or do they maintain the authentic accent or intonation. You can also look at hashtags that's used for promotion. It's curious to me why these ads associate Korea mainly with romantic relationships. why not family, which is also a common feature among Korean and Filipinos, and is a common theme in Korean dramas. You can also analyze the ads according to product domain, like analysis of the use of Korean language in food products, in beauty products, in apparel, because these you might find different results for each of these domains. And then going beyond the use of language, it would be also interesting to see what K is. What is that K in K beauty, in K food, in K apparel? So maybe a semiotic approach or the analysis of symbols can be used offhand. K beauty evokes a sense of naturalness or freshness, as indicated by the soft pink, soft blue, soft green hues, as opposed to the beauty evoked by Revlon or Max Factor, which is boldness, confidence, as indicated by the use of reds, browns, and dark reds and dark browns. So that would be also an interesting study to look at different signs and symbols used in ads, not limiting to language, but also font styles, color, space, icons, shapes, and so on. So there are still a lot of things that we can look for in these ads or look at in these ads. And I would also be interested to read Sir Eric's paper looking at the marketing, the use of Korean wave in marketing products. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Farah. Okay, so with that, no, thank you very much again, James and Ma'am Farah. And with that, we formally conclude today's lecture. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So for other updates or future events, please visit UPKRC's Facebook page and also visit UPKRC's YouTube channel later on to access this recording and also to access other lectures by the UPKRC. So we hope to see you again in our future events. Thank you and have a safe and happy rest of the week ahead. Kamsahamnida. Maraming salamat po.